So the church is always living with the eschaton ever before it. It's always having its eye on heaven, but also on earth in terms of spotting and avoiding this spirit of Antichrist, the denial of the theanthropic nature of Christ, which also applies to the church. Very important to point that out. In other words, the ecclesiological heresy, which people call ecumenism, the doubting of the oneness and the holiness, Catholicity and the apostolicity of the church in the various ways that happens in the 20th century, is a manifestation of the spirit of Antichrist, ultimately. Elder Athanasios Metelineos, the great elder from Greece, says that when in the Revelation it says there will become a temptation upon all the earth, it will come and it will cover the earth. There's a temptation. That temptation is exactly this: the doubting, the rejecting of the theanthropic nature of Jesus Christ as a person, but also the church as his body. And that's why he says ecumenism, again, the ecclesiological heresy of ecumenism, not the ecumenical movement per se, because there's a variety of manifestations of the ecumenical movement, but the teaching, the idea that there's not one church, same body, yesterday, today, and forever, that undermining that reality in the world is the main, let's say, process or way in which the world is preparing to receive Antichrist. When the church, when salvation, like the Perennialists teach, can be found, and we can arrive at communion with God, whether we're Hindus or Muslims or Christians, or when that has become accepted among Christians, that's going to be a sign that the Antichrist is imminent. That doubting, that relativization of the scandal of the particular, which is the scandal of the incarnation for the rationalist, right? He can't understand and accept that salvation is here in this place and time, and not, in all religions or in all paths up the mountain. That is an unacceptable confession and a narrowness and a old-fashioned medieval nonsense for modern man. That's exactly where the Christian needs to be, because that shows that he's with the Christ who's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Do you think that idea would manifest itself more as a one world religion, like where it's everyone united to this?
No, there'll be no one world religion in the sense of uniting, manifesting externals, rituals all converging. There doesn't need to be. If you know anything about perennialism, that's really, I think, a type of perennialism will be what the Antichrist will preach. Perennialism is this idea that, and this is Christian perennialism, there's different kinds of versions of perennialism, but this idea that there's the various religions, the major strands of religion, the Sufi Muslims or the various Hindus and Jews, Christians, the various religions are all paths up the mountain. Famously said by Fritjof Schumann, who was one of the kind of prophets of perennialism after René Guénon. He said, there's a transcendental, he says, unity of all religions. And he says, and this has been taken up by a few Christians, including the previous Pope, which is a terrible, terrible thing, this idea that God willed the religions and that the religions are paths for union with God. Total innovation, unprecedented, unheard of in the patristic teachings. But that idea that the religions in and of themselves separately are all salvific or paths that in those religions you can find the path to salvation and reach God. Therefore, making Christianity just one of many religions, Christ one of many saviors, and they reason there in many different ways, but in one way, which is very characteristic, they reason their way into this because they cannot accept that, for instance, the Hindus in India, or the Buddhists in China, or whatever, the Muslims in the Middle East, they reason that because Christianity never spread to the whole world, in a dominating way, replacing the religions, therefore these religions must be passed up the mountain, because how else can we explain, God's ordering of things? We have to find an explanation for the way that the religions have come down to us and the way that they've existed. And so it's a very rationalistic, arrogant way. They have to this strong intellectual way of approaching truth, rational way of approaching truth, leads them to these kind of conclusions, and it's a big trap for modern man because he trusts so much his rational intellect to figure out and to explain everything. But there's no need for us to answer those questions. There's a need for us to find communion with the person of Christ. And these kind of things we don't have to have answers, human answers for. God will take care of them. But I think the answer is that there will be a unity of religions, but not a one world religion.
It definitely looks like now we're getting closer to the time period where we will have a means to enforce, like, let's say, for example, enforce everyone get a mark. Like it says in the scriptures, it says, those that are locked up, but also free, those that are poor, those that are rich, like no one will be able to escape it. It certainly looks like the technological advancement that we have now, we're headed towards that direction where no one can hide. Like even if you lived underground, you wouldn't be able to hide because we have technology to find you. It doesn't matter. On any quadrants of the earth, we'd be able to find you. And I say we as in the humans, the government would be able to find you. It at least seems that there's an attempt to undo the effects of the fall that,
Transhumanism is the most obvious spirit, yes. The manifestation in our days of the spirit of the serpent in the garden. This is exactly what he was telling mankind. Be gods without God. But what they're actually preaching is a terrible, hellish existence. Because the God allowed for death precisely to bring an end to the effects and the result of the fall. And then through death, trample down death and then bring life eternal. So the fact that they want to be on this earth apart from God forever is a desire for a hellish existence, ultimately. It's not communion with God. A fallen world forever is a terrible thing. We don't want that. But get back to the question of the mark of the beast and bringing it on all of humanity. It's important to point out that it won't be forced. They'll choose it. There's no benefit for the Antichrist to force people to accept it. Now, force in the sense of there will be much manipulation of humanity, right. But ultimately it will be a choice, and the choice will be die or take the mark or flee into the wilderness. But people will have become so attached. That's the spirit of secularization, the spirit of the wilderness. The people, generally, mankind will be they will lust so much after the things of the flesh and the things of the world that they will welcome the perfect system of Antichrist. And they will suffer, though. It'll be a terrible thing and that's how it is now, though. When we welcome and embrace the passions, we ultimately suffer. We're ultimately suffering from that state. It's not peace. It's not joy. It's a terrible trap. And that's how it will be in the times of Antichrist, but it'll be manifest in terms of control grids and all the rest. But you can see signs of the future control grid through some of the things right now that are in the news. Things like central currencies that are digital. That means that someone could basically turn you off and you no longer have access to society if you're not an obedient, if they choose that you're not an obedient. You can see that. Now, I still think that's going to be a ways, but that kind of thing is not, there are many things like that in the 20th and 21st centuries which were unprecedented and couldn't have been imagined. Not 1,000 years ago, 80 years ago. I remember one of my old timers in the village. He keeps, every time I see him up outside Thessaloniki, when I was the priest there in the village, he would say when he was a child in the 30s or 40s, just a couple of years before television came to Greece, they were discussing in the religion education class, the book of Revelation, the Antichrist, what will happen, and how all the world will see the deaths of the two martyrs, Elijah and Enoch, by the Antichrist. And he, as a young boy, said to the teacher, how is it possible for all the world to see that in Jerusalem? And the teacher didn't know how to answer. Now we know how to answer. It's very obvious and very easy for the whole world to see. We see every day, seconds later, what happened in Iran and Iraq right now, or in Israel. So those are massive, unprecedented things in 2,000 years of church history that clearly point us that we're getting closer and closer to the manifestation of the spirit of Antichrist in a person and in the system of Antichrist.
Tell me what you think of my crazy conspiracy theory. I think I call it the Great Ascension theory. I think in our lifetime we will see the undoing of the consequence of the Tower of Babel. So the story of the Tower of Babel, how the languages were split. I think in our lifetime we'll see the unification of the languages again. And Elon Musk even said this. He said this a while back, that he said it's possible that within 10 years we won't need to speak anymore because we could interact with each other through technology. And so I think we live in a time period where the means are possible. And I'm one of the individuals that do think that it's in our lifetime that we will see these things. But going back to what I was saying, the Great Ascension, we talk about the fall of Adam and Eve. When they bit from the apple, they experienced a type of loss of, I don't know about loss, but some type of change in consciousness, right? I don't know if that would be consonant with the
Well,
church fathers.
they knew they were naked. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Yeah, when they bit, they felt shame. They knew they were naked. They had some type of change in consciousness. With the Great Ascension, through technological means,
They lost their innocence is what that means. But
yes, we'll have a type of change of consciousness as well, an elevated sense of consciousness. And that'll get us closer to the concept of, it's not my theory, the concept of singularity, of merging into, it's almost like an artificial theosis, merging into a super intelligence. And your people are seeing it now, technology that is marked by that super intelligence, it's a one mind. The AI is one mind. Artificial intelligence is one mind. And eventually, humans, the more we upgrade ourselves cybernetically, because we will be upgrading ourselves cybernetically over time, we will start to merge with that technology and then kind of, in a sake to save ourselves without God.
See, I think this gradual distortion of the human person has to be resisted by the Christians and the Orthodox, and you have to be cognizant of it. That's why you have to know the teachings of the church on Antichrist, spirit of Antichrist. If you don't, you will not resist. That gradual distortion of the human person you're talking about with transhumanism and singularity and all that is absolutely a part of the mystery of iniquity and a part of the preparation for humanity. And the more you open yourself up to that and say, I'm going to be a part of that, the more likely you're going to not resist. The big catch-22 is, when do we tell the Christians, cease, don't participate? Because the earlier it is, the harder it is for them to exist. The later it is, the harder it is for them to break out.
Right.
But there's got to be a point where Christians are going to say it's better to be in the wilderness than to be a part of this system, because the system is going to be such a stranglehold on humanity that you're setting yourself up for a fall. It's like the occasion for sin. Avoid the occasion for sin. Don't be proud and say, "Oh, I'll be fine."